Welcome back, I hope all is well. Today we're gonna talk about how much it costs to start up a private practice. So one of the cool things about being in private practice is that the startup costs are not as high as some other professions. Just for example, let's say you wanted to open up a deli. You need to have a space, you need to have all sorts of machines to cut the meats, you need refrigerators, you need a whole bunch of different things just to get the deli opened. As a therapist, you don't really need that much. However, there are some things you do need, and that's what we're gonna talk about today. However, if you haven't done so already, please do go ahead and subscribe down below, hit the thumbs up button on this video, but only if you want to. There is no pressure. So like a lot of the different topics we talk about, there's no concrete answer. Everyone's startup costs are gonna be different. So you can ask 5 different therapists what their startup costs were, and all 5 are gonna give you different answers. So because of that, I'm gonna divide this video into 2 sections. The first one is what I would call required. The second section is what I would call optional. And just so you know, I'm dividing the list into required and optional. There may even be some debate on which one's required and which one is optional. But I'll give a little bit of explanation for each item as we go through it. In addition, I'll also give you an educated guess into how much each specific item we talk about might cost, because once again, there's a wide range of different options, even for the different items that we're going to talk about. Oh, and also I'll be showing a graphic on the screen that depicts the different startup costs. This is from my startup guide. There's a link to that down below. All right, so the 4 items that I have under the required section are malpractice insurance, your EHR, which is your electronic health record. Sometimes it's called an EMR, electronic medical record, a HIPAA compliant video platform, something like the HIPAA compliant Zoom or the platform from Psychology Today, and then also an office space. That's considering if you are an in-person therapist. All right, so the first one is malpractice insurance. Now this one is absolutely not debatable. This one is required. Malpractice insurance is going to protect you from lawsuits and legal trouble. So you'll definitely want to purchase this before you even start running your private practice, before you ever see your first client. Actually, this is the first thing you should probably do if you're considering starting a private practice. Now, again, there are so many options out there, but from my experience, malpractice insurance for a therapist is going to run you somewhere between, I would say, $200 and $250 per year. Now, this does go up, I think, incrementally over the first few years, and then I think it levels out. But this will vary depending on the state and the type of degree you have. So I'm a clinical social worker. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same for mental health counselors or psychologists. I'm sure it's slightly different, but this is a general ballpark. And then the second required item that I have is the electronic medical record. Now this might be optional only if you're gonna keep paper records, but I don't think this is gonna be a thing much longer, so it's essentially going to be required. And if you don't know, your EMR, electronic medical record, is where all of your documentation, client information, notes, all of that kind of stuff lives. So it's really crucial, it's an important part of your private practice. And so there are tons and tons of options out there for different EMR softwares. I've seen them ranging in price from around $45 per month all the way up to about $100 per month. And this was considering a solo private practitioner. I know if you have a group practice or something like that, it may be a little bit more costly. But once again, this varies depending on what you want to choose. And then this third item is going to be for anyone who's running virtual sessions at any point. It's going to be your audio video platform for hosting therapy sessions. So how are you going to see your client for their sessions? Is it going to be via Zoom? Is it going to be via the Psychology Today application? Is it going to be the Simple Practice application? Again, there are tons and tons of options, and I see these ranging in price from $10 to $15 per month. Now, for some of the EMRs that we just talked about, the video solution is actually built in and might even be part of that cost as well. But I have seen that these are sometimes separate, and this is another required cost for startup. And then finally, this fourth item is going to be for anyone who's running in-person sessions, and this would be office space. Now this I don't have a quote for because it's gonna vary greatly depending on where you live or where your practice is. So for people in New York City, the cost of rent of an office is gonna be very, very high compared to someone in a different space perhaps. So again, if you are someone who's doing in-person sessions, you're going to need to pay for rent and office space to have your sessions. And then another item that I actually didn't include, and I'll tell you why in just a second, would be the HIPAA compliant form of communication. So HIPAA compliant email address, text messages, things like this. Basically a way to communicate with clients that's HIPAA compliant. Now, this does have cost associated with it. So for example, if you do something like Powbox, actually don't know how to say it. I'll put the name up here somewhere. But this costs money to have a HIPAA compliant email platform. Now, the reason why I didn't add this as a required item is because a lot of the EMRs have a method of communication built in. So I use Malpractice and they have a messenger built into that platform. So I actually didn't need to go for a HIPAA compliant email. I just use their messenger whenever I want to send HIPAA compliant communication. And in addition, a lot of the different platforms have portals as well, which then allows you to send documents in a HIPAA compliant way as well. So for me personally, I did not need the HIPAA compliant email platform separately. All right, so let's go ahead and transition into some of the optional items. And the first one that people are often thinking about, they think this might be required, is the business entity, something like a PLLC, an LLC, an S Corp, something like that. This is actually optional. You are not required to establish a business entity to begin a private practice. One thing to know, I'm not going to be able to go into intense detail about the different items that we talk about today. And if you do want to know more about some of these things, I made another video called How to Start a Private Practice. I talk a bit more about things like the business entity in that video. I'll link it up here somewhere, also put it down in the description as well. And so a business entity, depending on which type you set up, is going to cost you some money. Now, for me personally, this was one of the larger startup expenses that I had. I did establish a PLLC in the state of New York, and I paid a company to help me establish this PLLC. They were called Capital Services. By the way, they're really good. They're not just in New York, but they worked with me virtually over the phone, via email, and they really helped me get everything set up. I will put their link down below in the description as well. Now, the whole cost for this was roughly around $2,000. And now one of the reasons why this was so expensive is because it was established in New York City. And one of the components of the PLLC is publishing some sort of notice in local newspapers. Now again, I didn't do this part myself because the company did it for me, but depending on what newspaper and what county that newspaper is a part of, it can be really costly to have advertising space. So if you live somewhere more rural or a place that's not as expensive as New York City, the cost of publication might be cheaper. Now this is just a side note, and just to say that the cost of establishing a PLLC is going to be more expensive in New York City than it is in another state or even another town within New York. So again, this will vary. But again, for me, my cost roughly for that entire process was about $2,000. Now, that is a one-time cost, but then there are other yearly costs associated with having a PLLC. And one of these costs would be something called a registered agent. And this for me was roughly about $200 per year. If you want to know more about what a registered agent is, I have linked an article down below. You can go ahead and check that out. The next item in the optional list would be consultation fees. So you may want to consider consulting with an attorney or a CPA to learn more about establishing business entities, legal guidelines for your practice, all sorts of reasons why you might want to talk to an attorney before starting your private practice. Now, this is definitely going to range depending on where you live and what type of service you're looking for. So for me, for example, I did a couple consultations with a lawyer, a couple consultations with a CPA, and then I also purchased documents from a lawyer, a healthcare lawyer to be specific. And so I would say that this cost is roughly going to be between $100 to $500. The lawyers and the CPAs will typically charge you by the hour, but in my opinion, you probably don't need a full hour of consultation time for either the lawyer or the attorney. And then you may buy paperwork from an attorney or something like that. For me personally, the paperwork, everything I purchased from that attorney was a little less than $100. So I'm going to go in the ballpark and say it's between $100 and $500 total for any sort of consultation you'll do with a lawyer or an accountant. And then the next item will be for those who want to accept insurance. And now there are a lot of options out there for accepting insurance, especially with the new startup companies like Alma and Headway. And so I would say that to accept insurance, it's going to cost you anywhere between $0 and $1,000 per year. So the price range is very great, but each of these different platforms and different ways to get credentialed has different pros and cons. Again, if you want to learn more about this, it's going to be in my How to Start a Private Practice video, which is somewhere up here again, and then also linked down in the description. But I do think that being able to accept insurance is really important, especially if you're just starting, and may be worth the investment. And for me personally, I use Alma, which is a paid service that gets me credentialed, and this does have a monthly fee. but there are other places like Headway, which are completely free, which also credential you. So again, tons of different options, different price points, and this one is probably this one varies the most. And so this is something to really think about. Do some more research on the different options and choose which one you think would be best. And this is a great point to interrupt the video and let you know that this video is sponsored by Thrizer. If you're someone who does not want to accept insurance and you only want people to use their out-of-network benefits, well then Thrizer is going to be the perfect platform for you. It is a completely free platform for both you as the therapist and also any client who enrolls in the platform as well. Thrizer does a whole bunch of really cool things, but one of their coolest features, they will provide end-to-end support for any of your clients using their out-of-network benefits. They will ensure that the process goes smoothly and that they get reimbursed for their therapy sessions. This really helps you as the therapist. You can get your cash pay rate while also helping the client use the out-of-network benefits that they're entitled to. They do all of the legwork. So it's not a hassle for the clients, it's not a hassle for you. It really takes the hassle out of using out-of-network benefits. So this is really a win-win for both of you, and it's free for everyone. Go ahead and check it out. There's a link down below where you can sign up today for free. And the next item will be for anyone who wants to have a website for their private practice. Websites typically cost anywhere between $10 to $15 per month. And this seems to be pretty standard. And another cost associated with the website would be something called a domain name. So this would be essentially what your website is called. So for me, it is MatthewRyanLCSW.com. That part, what I just said, MatthewRyanLCSW.com, that's called a domain name. And that costs about $25 per year. And this will vary though, depending on how popular that domain name may be. But I have seen from my experience, most people who want to start a private practice, you're not going for a big name that's already used. You're typically using your own name, or you've come up with your own original name. And roughly the domain name will be about $25 per year. And then the final item I have on my optional list is being listed on some sort of directory. The most common one that people think about is Psychology Today. This is going to be roughly $30 per month. Now, I think this is a wise decision because tons of referrals come through Psychology Today, but there are other options as well to be listed on a directory. Some are $0 and then they range in price. So I would say to be on a directory is going to cost you anywhere between $0 to $30 per month. So as you can see on the low end, if you only do the required items, it's going to cost you about $500 to get started, and then that will equal to about $115 ongoing monthly costs. This really isn't too bad considering how expensive it is to start another business like a restaurant. And then if you want to add on other things like establishing a business entity, starting a website, your cost will go up quite a bit. Now, I don't think there's one right or wrong way to do this. If you want, you can start with just the required items, or if you're on a budget, you can start with just the required items, and then from there work your way up and decide what you want next in terms of optional items. However, I will say that some of the optional items we talked about today are really helpful to do before starting. And if you want to know more about the specifics, you can check out the other video I've mentioned a couple times, how to start a private practice, or you can check out my guide on starting a private practice, which is linked down below. This will give you explicit details about what I think are the best ways to get your practice started. But regardless of which way you choose, hopefully this was a good starting point for you. Gives you a little bit of an idea about how much it might cost to start a private practice. I hope this was helpful for you. I hope you learned something. And until next time, I look forward to seeing you soon.